This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, well, Lisa Haber, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Larry. It's good to be here with you.
So let's start with the Accelerate Philly plan. What in this plan is new, and what are we looking at as an ultimate result here?
Larry, Larry and Denise, it's really hard to say what's new. As member of the Alliance for Philadelphia Public Schools, we've been going to board meetings, before that, the School Reform Commission meetings. We have seen, I have seen, if you want to go back to the Arlene Ackerman Imagine 2014 plan, we had Dr. Height's, his action plan, and now we have the board created its own set of goals and guardrails. That's really a very data-driven process. And now we have Dr. Watlington's strategic plan, and going to the meetings and knowing the history, I'm not seeing very much that's new here. I see a lot of vague goals and wishes, which all sound good, but when I read it, and this question did come up briefly in the board meeting last week, and also in the news media, do we have the money for this? And we don't right now. And that's fine. That doesn't mean you can't have a plan where you say these are our goals. But I see a number of problems with the plan.
So, this is right now the sort of culmination of Dr. Watlington's tenure so far. He did listening tours, he pulled people together, he had these deep dives into what the district needs. What does this miss, or are there things that it's ignoring that should have been taken into consideration?
Well, it did bring people together, but I have to say, I think they really missed out on the community engagement in the report itself, which is ironic because there's a whole section on community engagement. Members of APSM were, teachers, librarians, counselors, parents, and retired educators. We've gone to every single board meeting, and the SRC meetings before that. We were not asked to be part of this. And I did address it in one of my op-eds. I call it governance by invitation. So that is one problem, reading about community engagement and transparency. And this plan is a plan that, until APS put some pressure on them and other members of the community put pressure on, they didn't even want to show to people before the board voted on it. So that's one problem, that the board talks about public engagement, and they were about to approve this 5-year plan without anybody ever having seen it. So we wrote to the board. I know other people wrote to the board. And so the day before, they finally said, okay, we're going to pull this out. We're going to review it, and then we'll vote on it next week. So the problem, I'll tell you what I don't see in the plan. One, bringing back school libraries with certified school librarians. That's been an issue for years. The Inquirer's written about it. The public school notebook, Chalkbeat, that is something that's really on people's minds. We need to bring back school libraries where kids can take out books. A lot of kids really cannot get to their neighborhood libraries. We know that those libraries have been closed in some neighborhoods, nights and weekends. So it's really important to have a school library. I don't see that. I don't see any mention of smaller class size, which is a proven reform. Have a better teacher to student ratio. I saw passing mention of art and music. Saw very little mention of support staff. And when I look for these things, I say, okay, I'm at every meeting, and I hear from the speakers, and I see what they're talking about. I think some of that is reflected in the strategic plan, but there's so many things that people come back with like support staff, and you look at the Inquirer today has a story on a big problem. Now they only mention district schools, but it is a problem in charter schools also of attendance. So you really need people. The district has had, I don't know how many there are left, but from what I am told, not many, home and school liaisons, truant officers, but more than that. I don't want to just call them truant officers. But obviously, if you have a big attendance problem, you need more support staff. Not saying that. So things that educators know are basic proven reforms. I'm seeing either no mention, like school libraries or class side, or very little mention.
One of the things you had mentioned that is particularly troubling is the idea that this plan came out, they were going to vote on it without the public really seeing it. And then because of pressure, they pushed it back by a week. It seems like there are more and more issues like that with the school board, including speaker policy and things like that. What has that been like for you and people you work with?
Well, it's gotten to the point now where some of our people from apps and people who are allied with apps, and just people who communicate with us online, have actually said to us, I went online to the school district site. The window to sign up opened at 4. I got there at 6:30. It was closed already. There is no longer any kind of, even with the limited speakers, there's no policy that says we're going to have X number of speakers per issue. So you can end up at a meeting with 30 general speakers. And we have actually seen this where almost half of the speakers are on one topic. Last week at the May action meeting, there were 78 action items. Well, if you're only allowing 30 people to sign up, and not everybody's talking about an action item, they may be talking about what's going on at their child's school or just issues in general. But when you have a limit of 30 speakers and you have 78 items, I mean, do the math, you're going to have a lot of people who signed up to speak on something and they're not going to be able to speak. And, APPS has, along with Herb Ed, we have sued the board and the district for their speaker suppression policy, which in many ways, in the way that I just cited, is a violation of the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act. So it has gotten worse. And what happened at the May meeting to me and at the April meeting at other APPS members was that people were stopped on the way into the auditorium and told they couldn't come in. I mean, and this was early and the auditorium wasn't even filled up. And this happened to me in May and I was told you can't go in. My colleague, Linda Rubin, they said, yeah, you can go in, you're on the speaker list. And I was told I couldn't go in. And I said, well, I'm going in. I don't know if you're going to send somebody to arrest me, but I am walking into that auditorium because now the board says you can be on the speaker list if you didn't speak the month before and if you get there in time. I kind of think it was like your virtual lawn chair. You're getting in line so you can be one of the lucky people. But now if you are told, and it's the board's decision whether or not you come in as a speaker, now you can't come in at all because you're not on the speaker list. And that is getting pretty oppressive. We have also noticed, and we put pictures of this on our website, last month when one of our people was detained in the atrium downstairs and told you can't come up, the board only had 82 chairs set up in an auditorium that holds 240 people. This month, they had 110 chairs set up. Again, 240 people. And after I was told I couldn't come in, and I was in there anyway, and President Streeter came in, and I told him what happened. And I said, incidentally, no matter how many chairs you set up, people are allowed to be here. If they want to stand, they want to stand. But it's gotten really oppressive, and people are getting pushed farther and farther back in the auditorium because they set up more and more tables and chairs for district staff. So, I mean, the optics are so clear that the public is not the priority. And these are public meetings. So you can have surveys, you can have committees, which again, we were invited to. You can have all of this illusion of reaching out to the public, and you can have community engagement committees that are not open to the public. What do you have? You have what I call governance by invitation. We will choose how we hear from you, and we will choose how your questions are taken. That is not governance. And that's why we always come back to, we need an elected school board. If government officials are not accountable to the voters as they are, in a democracy and in every other district in the state and surrounding counties, then they're not accountable to the public, and they will do these things. And I'd like to mention too that at that meeting, there were 71 items remaining after they withdrew a couple items. At the end of the meeting, President Streeter put all 71 into one bundle, and they took one roll call vote.
Mhm.
Now, they had done this before. So when somebody calls, one of the board members says, so moved, and then they'll go board member by board member, and, one will say, I'm going to vote yes on everything except for 17 and 22. I'm going to vote no. And then the next board member says, oh, I'm going to vote yes on everything, but I'm going to abstain on 3, 5. And it's like keeping score. But you, as a member of the public, and we're pretty experienced, we've been doing this for years, we can't keep track of what they're voting on. What was newly astounding to me was they did all this with a city council member in the audience. Council member Jamie Gaultier came to be with her constituents because they had been fighting for many months to get Sayre Pool reopened, and they did a great job. And so they finally had it on the agenda, and the board was going to vote to reopen the pool. And council member and her constituents waited till the very end of this 7-hour meeting until 11 o'clock at night. And the board, I thought in a move that was so disrespectful, didn't even pull out that item separately, so the people in West Philly who fought so hard for that pool could have their moment of, we won this one. 71 official items that amounted to new spending of about $500 million. Many of those items are no bid contracts. Now, you could not imagine the outcry if city council tried to pull something like that. Stuck something on the agenda that had no bidding process, no examination, no going into committee and then waiting for people to just stick it on there and vote for it, and no deliberation. No governmental body in a democracy should be operating that way.
I'd like to bring Denise Clay Murray here on Philadelphia Homeland.
Hi, and thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Has there been any discussion in terms of this 5-year plan about the court decision that came down on funding equity for the schools? If you're saying that you don't have enough money for something, wouldn't that be a good place to start?
Do you mean starting with trying to get more money from the state?
Yes.
That would be a good place to start. With the new mayor coming in, that's another good place. And with city council, which is going to have so many new members on it, maybe that's an opportunity to get more money. We in APS would also say, while we're fighting and advocating to get money from the city and the state, let's also look at the board spending priorities. For example, last week, there were two official items that were passed, and again, with almost no deliberation by the board. There were three, one was withdrawn. So we ended up with two items, one for a new reading curriculum for $20 million and one for a math curriculum, $20 million. And these are online programs. Now, I've talked to a couple teachers who, one high school teacher, one kindergarten teacher, who were very skeptical of this, and especially after over a year of having their kids online in virtual school, couldn't understand why the district was spending 40 million so far on an online curriculum. I mean, for a lot of reasons, it just didn't make sense. But again, it was rushed through without much examination. There might have been one or two questions from the board, but and that doesn't include the assessment piece, I might add. So yeah, we need more money. We always do, but at the same time, what are we spending money? Are we spending money on consultants? You know, Dr. Watlington's been here a year now, but was actually preceded by a consultant that he wanted brought in at a cost of $450,000. So when you are always in a state of insecurity, the board always needs to be examining its own spending priorities.
Now, speaking of insecurity, you just mentioned that, you know, when you look at this plan, there are a lot of curriculum changes. Now, this is a student body, and students in the school district of Philadelphia that seems to go through curriculum changes every 5 minutes. Has anyone thought about how they're going to make it so whatever it is you learned or whatever it is you taught the kids in the previous group of curriculums is actually going to mesh with what you want to do with the new curriculums? Because otherwise, you're going to have a bunch of students that are starting over from scratch, and nothing makes, as someone who was taught school, nothing makes a kid more frustrated than having to relearn something they just learned 6 months ago in a totally different way.
Well, that is especially a problem in a district that is data driven. So, you know, kids move, and our student body is definitely more transient than it should be. But in a situation where we know that's the case, how do we make it so that we don't feel, you know, make a child feel like he or she's already behind? But you have to look at that, I think, through the lens of such a data driven system. Like the board's goals and guardrails, I mean, they talk about whether children are proficient in reading, math, science, whether the high school kids are at a certain place in the keystones. I mean, you know, one of the parts of this plan was we're going to bring in more testing, which I think a lot of people would say that is the wrong direction to go. Because if you say, well, a child is moving and, you know, maybe he was learning about, you know, Greece and this in his school, and now he's learning about, you know, ancient Rome, that's not really that big. Becomes a problem when you're looking at, is this child on the same page, and can this child take the standardized test and achieve? That's the word, achieve an outcome. That's not going to work, because if you're looking at whether children are learning or achieving only through the lens of test scores, that really does a disservice to the children, and already makes them feel like they're behind.
And also, and this is just my experience as the wife of a college professor, you have these kids that then go into college classrooms and are in some ways incapable of independent thought, and which makes teaching them things like how to analyze a piece of literature or something next to impossible, and leads to like a grown man walking through the halls yelling really crazy things because he's trying to do this and is met at every turn with frustration. I guess my last question is, you brought up the concept of an elected school board versus an appointed school board. Now, as someone who has covered elected school boards for much of the last 30 years, and people get mad at me when I say this, they are not a panacea, because while you're not necessarily dealing with the politics of a board being appointed as opposed to elected, you're dealing with electoral politics in a situation that they don't necessarily fit into. If Philadelphia goes to an elected school board, and there seems to be a movement in that direction, in a perfect world, how would you keep the electoral politics part of an elected school board separate from the, we're here for the kids and we got to do what's best for the kids part of the school board? Because most of the elected school boards I've seen, that doesn't happen.
I don't think there's a problem. If it's not a problem, like in Bryn Mawr or Bucks County or Council Rock, if people in those places are entrusted to elect their own representatives, I don't think that the people of Philadelphia should be disenfranchised. And, when President Streeter came into the board and was talking about depoliticizing education, and I said, there's no such thing as depoliticizing education. You may be appointed, not elected, but you're on a political body. You're on a political body that has an almost $4 billion budget. You're either going to represent your constituents, who is everybody in the city, including people who go to school or whose kids go to school or work in schools. You are part of a political body. If you say we're going to depoliticize, to me, that's saying I'm not going to say anything because I want to pretend this isn't a political system. Or you're going to come to the school board, you're going to go to Harrisburg, you're going to fight for the funding, you're going to fight for the curriculum that you want for your kids, you're going to fight for getting out lead and asbestos. So I don't see it, Denise, the way that you're seeing that, like there's these terrible electoral politics, and then it's like we're here for the kids. I mean, I've been watching this district for over 20 years, and I've seen the school board and the SRC and the school board, and I've been to school board meetings in other districts. If we don't trust the people of Philadelphia to pick their elected representatives, I mean, let's just appoint everybody. Let's appoint the mayor. Let's appoint city council. We live in a representative democracy, and we have to be able to say, in a democracy, if our school system is working, we are teaching people how to be good citizens. And part of that is advocating for what you want for your community and your children. And I think there's this illusion that, and I think you put it well, whether it's politics of elected or politics of appointed. I think some people want to pretend that because a board is appointed, there's no politics, which, is, as a 20+ year observer, not the case.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I'm going to give you back to our co-host, Larry McGlynn, and you're listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5.
Thank you, Denise.
Lisa, before we let you go, I'd like to ask you about the op-ed you had in Billy Penn last week. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I had been, as a Philadelphian, of course, watching this election, and I went to 3 or 4 live forums for the mayoral candidates, and then I watched some on TV and online, and I wasn't happy with the level of discourse around education. And then when Cheryl Parker was nominated as the Democrat to run in November, of course, her issues became much more to the forefront. And her main platform that's gotten a lot of attention was year-round school, which surprised me. Again, you could go back and pull out all the speaker lists at the Board of Education. I am pretty sure you will not find anybody who said, please bring back year-round schooling. It's hardly a priority. People want money spent on the old buildings. They want money spent on taking lead and asbestos out. You know, they want money spent on bringing back school librarians, on so many issues that are in the news that people talk about. I had somebody from the transition team, actually, there were two people, but one put it right out on Twitter. I was on the transition team. I didn't hear anybody talking about year-round school. There's so many obstacles to that. I think that I see it as a diversion. There's so many. I mean, are you going to hire a whole new workforce in a time of having problems that come up all the time about, you know, being able to recruit and retain teachers? Are you really going to hire a whole new summer workforce? I mean, are you going to have kids in, excuse me, non-air conditioned buildings? Are you going to have teachers who don't live in the city, whose kids are on a different schedule? How's this going to work?
Yeah, and I think in a perfect world as a concept, it's worth talking about. Like, we can have the discussion. But like you said, the infrastructure isn't in place. Some of these buildings don't have air conditioning and can't have air conditioning because they're so old, it can't be installed. So I don't know how you do that.
And also, there was another article in the Inquirer today that said that Pennsylvania is losing the most teachers of any state right now.
Right.
So, you know, if you're losing more teachers than Florida, and I'm kind of trying to figure out how that's happening,
Right.
you know, talking about year-round school, particularly in a city where, as Larry pointed out, a lot of the buildings are too old to have air conditioners in them. And we've gotten rid of the Plan-Con system, which I'm still trying to figure out why we did that. You know, it kind of doesn't make, it's going to be hard to pull off if you actually decide to do it that way.
I don't see a reason to even think about it, honestly. Even if you had everything, if you had great buildings and they were air conditioned and kids had, schools had librarians, I don't understand the benefit of sending kids to school in the summertime. You know, our kids, what most of our kids who are on vacation, it's summertime, it's warm out. They're going swimming in the pool. They're going on vacation to the shore with their family. You know, our kids, you know, like, I don't want to pigeonhole people, but I don't think a lot of our kids are going on skiing vacations. So summertime is really an important time for families to be together, to you know, like visit extended family in other parts of the country. I truly believe that the whole issue of year-round school is a diversion. There's so many obstacles. We really need to focus on what we need to be doing right now to get kids in healthy buildings, in smaller class size, bringing back librarians, having, you know, curriculum that's meaningful, and get rid of like the kind of meaningless, you know, standards aligned, in other words, test score aligned curriculum. I really could do all those things. I mean, we really, really could. If we said, okay, we're going to fight for funding, we're going to reorder our spending priorities. I mean, I would have given up a long time ago if I thought we couldn't do those things. I really think we can do these things, but let's keep our eye on the ball here. Year-round schooling is not going to happen, and I don't even think it's something that our kids need.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Larry. Thanks, Denise.